I've noticed this in a lot of like red pill channels or whatever, where they think that every woman is like a stupid automaton who sleeps with one hot guy and then instantly starts like demanding like Chanel and Gucci from every guy she sees and only fucks with like 10 out of 10s. I don't think that's really happening that much in reality. There are crazy
No, it does
entitled women,
happen.
but there are like super crazy entitled dudes, right? Like we all know guys who aren't that attractive but are doing the like 2 out of 10 elbows too pointy bullshit with like really hot women, right?
Yeah, there are some delusional guys, but they're in the minority. Like there's a lot more delusional women about what they can obtain than there is delusional guys. And most guys who are delusional, like it's cope for them.
Are they
So,
delusional or are they right? Because those women seem to actually be getting the guys, right?
well, no, they've not adjusted to the new market conditions. Like, if a house costed $2,000 70 years ago, that was obviously a great price. But then 70 years later, because of inflation and everything, and just appreciation, like it's a really valuable area. Let's say that like the surroundings have been really developed, and the price of the house goes up to $1 million. Some guys are going to be like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to pay that because I could have got it for 2 grand 70 years ago. And a similar thing is happening in the dating market that, yeah, 70 years ago, these women who were below average, they might have been like, quite low value. And a lot of guys, would have dated them if they were on their level. But nowadays, these even below average women, because of, they've got access to Tinder, their standards have been inflated like artificially, then there's still going to be those guys out of there who are like, oh, I'm not going to date her. She's way too entitled. But they haven't adjusted to the new market condition. So it kind of alludes back to the point you mentioned earlier about it being a race to the bottom. Like guys are just constantly undercutting each other, lowering their standards turn by turn until like the women at the very bottom are being basically put on a
But
pedestal
that's
and they're seen as really attractive.
but this is the guy's fault then, because the women aren't changing. The
Yeah,
women,
on a macro, it is the guy's fault.
yeah,
If
okay,
guys
so
stop
we do need
stooping
a
so
broad
low, then it
social
would fix.
change, because like there's no way.
But that's not going to happen. How are you going to implement anything like that
There already
unless you
has
bring
been.
back the arranged marriages, that's practiced in Afghanistan and Iran,
Be
all of the Islamic
It's already
countries. Like, unless you're
happening.
going to bring back that, but that's not going to happen.
Be sluttier. The queer community is way better about this stuff than the straight community. More
Wait,
young
hold on a
people.
second. Say that point again. If you say for the people to be more promiscuous, that's going to fix things. That's
Yeah,
only going to
because
make things
no, no,
worse.
no. The problem that you're having right now is that you're framing promiscuity through like a made-up imbalance in economics. With in reality, like the problem here is that like I know the graphs that people use with the black pill, incel, red pill arguments, and it's usually like polling data where they ask women, which of these guys would you be willing to sleep with? Which is a terrible thing to ask women, by the way, because women don't care about appearance that much. That's the reason why the woman will only choose the super hot guys. Because they know, because every woman knows, a lot of guys are dangerous freaks. So you can show women a bunch of guys ranging from like 1 to 10, and they'll be thinking like, okay, given the odds that any one of these people could murder me, I'm only risking that shit with no prior conversation, with no knowledge of how they talk or how they act, on somebody who looks at least this good. And then you go in like reality and you like, and then you go to their apartment and you do that bitch you live like this thing, and there's some like fucking schlubby dude sitting in the bed with them, like absolutely getting his dome polished off. You can't do polling data for stuff like this because people will never poll accurately on like
Yeah,
what they actually.
I don't believe polls are a good metric. It sounds like we're deviating a little bit. The point that I thought we was about to focus on was, how we can like make
Yeah,
dating,
be sluttier. Yeah,
like
exactly. But in like
no,
a
no, no,
good
yeah.
way.
So I think that's like the opposite of a solution. That would only cause more problems because the more promiscuous a society, the more inequality
Why?
especially for guys, that is, in terms of the like their dating opportunities. Because monogamy is 1 to 1. Well, at least in theory it is. Like obviously you're gonna have infidelity going on, in a lot of marriages under monogamy. But assuming all things are perfect, and monogamy is like an extremely like core value of the society, then it would be a 1 to 1, um, you know, like equal system going on of men to women. Like every man gets a chance and every woman gets a chance. But
Okay,
in
why wouldn't
promiscuous
being
societies,
sluttier Like, why
Right,
would
so if
that?
in promiscuous societies, you just see the monopolization of the dating market by the top 10 to 15% of men, and then the bottom 90% is just left out.
Okay,
Because
so
if a woman has a choice of sleeping with, either a guy who's average, maybe on her level, or the top 5% guy, there's no limit. Well, at least
so
practically,
first
in
of
terms
all,
of how many women that the guy at the top can sleep with.
90% of men are absolutely not locked out of the dating market. I think that is an insane thing to
Yeah,
say.
that is a little bit of an exaggeration. I would probably say that the bottom 30% are completely invisible. And then the middle, like 50 to 60% is somewhat hanging on, but they're hanging on by a thread. Like they've not got options. They've not, like, I'm talking about the guys who get, 2 to 3 matches per week or per day on
They could
Tinder.
just be in a
Like,
relationship.
they're hanging on a thread. Yeah, okay, fair enough. You're still gonna have people in a relationship as well, but you're not gonna have bottom 30%ers in relationships.
There,
They're locked out
there are
together.
absolutely ugly people in relationships. That's been known to happen. You can go to any office building in the world, any workplace, you can go to any college campus. There will be ugly people in relationships who are having way more sex than you or I am having. It, like, however you math that behind the scenes. The problem that I have is that this is also deterministic. We're using hard numbers. Do we have evidence to back up those hard numbers? No, we have feelings. We went from 90 to 30% in one jump. Oh yeah, the bottom 30% don't have any chance. Yes, they do. Like, go talk to some fat ugly people. A lot of them are married or in relationships. So
Yeah,
it's
but
like,
it's becoming less and less so that way,
okay,
though,
but like
because
vague, like vibes. It's like I'm talking with like a horoscopes chick, right? Like, vibes. Like, okay, in reality, this is all so complicated. But then you watch the YouTube videos and it's like, listen up, 90% of men are getting 10% of the women. And it's like, okay, are they? I mean, I'm not a 10 out of 10. I've slept with women way the fuck more attractive than I have, often on a whim. I'm sure like these experiences are somewhat reciprocal. They happen all over the place. And like, a lot of the issue we're having is that women gatekeep sex too hard. At least a lot like do relative to men, right? Like, if you want people to be sluttier, it's not guys who have to be sluttier. Guys who are already sleeping around like freely. It's women who need to sleep around more freely. And then we have to think, okay, what social factors could we induce to get women to be more free and open with who they sleep around with, so we could kind of even out the consequences of being slutty broadly? And then like number one would be, you can't demonize women for sleeping around, would be the number one like thing that you'd do there to change that, right? Like, it's the social stigma.
it's not. It's the complete opposite. Your diagnosis is the opposite of what actually needs to happen if you're going to try and help the guys at the very bottom, in increasing their dating chances. Because if we rewind the clock, 100 years, like every guy, well, more or less every guy who wanted to, would be able to get married, have a family, live the white picket fence lifestyle.
That's not
Yada
true.
yada yada. You
A
get
lot
the
of them
point.
died alone.
It is. No, because it was all like, the vast majority of them were religious, living in religious communities, and they would get married at 20. Like the average age of marriage, like,
No.
you'd leave high school and then boom, you'd be handed a wife, and then you'd live happily
That's
ever
not true.
after.
No,
Hardly
that's your
anyone was getting
fantasy.
divorced.
That's your fantasy dream, like incel red pill recollection of history. Tons of guys just were
I
like,
can show you the data
weird.
on that.
More people got married and less people divorced back then than they do now, but tons of people were alone and lonely. Like, there are
No, how can you? That's a complete contradiction there. You just said that less people were getting divorced, more people were getting married, but somehow there was still more lonely guys.
That's not a contradiction. Both are true. Like, there were more people getting married, but not every person who's alone today is neither married nor in a relationship. And there are plenty of people who aren't lonely, who aren't married. They're just like in a partnership. People got married early back then, but a lot of people didn't. A lot of women like couldn't get married until they were like 23, and then they were considered kind of weird, and they like lived their life as a spinster. There were lots of guys who died in wars who never even got the chance to participate in like the dating market. Like the population like holes that were left by the Civil War and World War I and World War II and the respective countries that contributed to them, like massive like population deficiencies. That I mean, all those guys, like, they never got to be married, they never got a happily ever after. And then with like going back home after, black GIs didn't get to benefit from the GI Bill. So when they got back to America, like, these guys didn't get the white picket fence lifestyle. They just like went back to the fucking Jim Crow slum they came from. It's easy to romanticize like kind of socially enforced monogamy in retrospect, but in reality, a lot of people back then were miserable. Back in the 1950s, like we were handing out record numbers of prescriptions for antidepressants and like amphetamines to women in traditional marriages because they had nothing going on in their lives except like waiting for their husband to come back home after fucking their secretary. It's like, and not to mention, like, nobody could divorce back then, right? Because, like, if you were a woman and you tried to divorce back then, like, your life is fucking over, dog. No man is going to marry a woman, or at least not many men, who's been known to divorce beforehand, because men don't like women who are willful. They don't want a woman who would complain or leave them if they beat them or cheated on them. So, like, we have very bad standards when it comes to how happy people were in the past. People have gotten freer with time, and I think that's good, but we need to balance out that freedom with like an appropriate and proportional level of investment in the consequences of that freedom. And I think the best thing we could do for that is to go, okay, hey, maybe women will be a little bit more open to like sleeping around if we don't shame them for it. If it's like, okay, you know, let women sleep with guys who are a bit less attractive and let that not be a shameful thing for them and let it not be a shameful thing for us and let the whole dynamic flow.
How are you going to
smoothly.
convince them to sleep with the guys who are less attractive? It's just not going to happen.
They've done it to me.